land acknowledgement that we are located here and recording and speaking on the traditional and unceded territory of the Snuneymuxw people and the Coast Salish people, and their thousands of years of serving this land, and how grateful I am to be able to be here with you on this territory. It's truly a privilege, and for that we say Haichka.
Haichka.
Haichka. Yeah, thank you. Norm Detillieux. Did I say that correctly?
You did great.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
That's French, right?
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Where French?
Actually, French-Belgian. It's true.
Did you know that my last name is Flemish, Belgian?
There we go.
So does that mean your family's from?
My great-great-grandparents originated from Belgium.
Wow. So when did they come to Canada?
So that was like early 1900s. I think it was like 1905. And
wow.
They settled they were original settlers in southern Saskatchewan.
Okay.
So if you can imagine arriving in Canada and being given a piece of land that was treed and that first winter, could you imagine, right?
A shock.
Yeah, for sure. And having to put together a house and find enough food that first year and figure out water and how you're going to heat your house. I mean,
right.
It just
all of those things.
Wow, it really puts things in perspective.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, that's interesting. I did not know that. I know we've known each other for a while. We've worked together, and I'll ask you in a moment to sort of give me an overview of what you do, because I think it's always best for people to put it in their own words than me trying to read some bio. But my grandparents on my dad's parents came here in the late 1800s. And they settled in Thunder Bay, Ontario, on the Lakehead, Lake Superior, and yeah, that's as much as I know of them, except that they left Belgium just before the turn of the century. And then my grandfather went back to Belgium during World War I to lead his cavalry. He was a cavalry sergeant, so the Canadian Army wouldn't accept him because he was older and he had children, and they didn't want him to be part of the war, and he was too old. So he got on a ship and went back to Belgium so that he could fight for the homeland. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So, and that's great. I don't know if I've ever known another Canadian that is from Belgium, and their grandparents or their forefathers came over and settled in Canada. That's great.
There we go. We got so much in common.
Look at that. Wow. And that's the show, everybody. So thank you for coming in today. This is really just about me finding people from Belgium.
That's it. Awesome, man.
Why don't you let us know what you do?
Well, I mean, the purest of it is I help people get connected to their source. Okay. And when I say their source, it really is, both within and around us, energy. Yeah. Right. Guidance, intuition. Okay. Right. In the practical terms, I'm a chiropractor. Right. Right. So that's how I facilitate helping people get connected, is through being a professional chiropractor.
And how long?
It has been now, licensed 19 years. Wow. I often joke, though, it goes right back to when I was about 5 or 6 years old. Okay. My dad was a farmer. And he had a very serious back injury, a spondylolisthesis. He was actually scheduled for back surgery. He was bedridden.
Right. So this is when you were 5. This happened? Okay.
For sure. So he was, I was just a wee lad. And he was introduced to chiropractic. And the chiropractor was able to rehabilitate him and get him back into the workforce. But being a farmer, he was a half-hour drive to go to the chiropractor. So there was often days after a hard day out farming where he'd come in and he would talk his oldest son to walk on his back and give him a massage. Right. So I often joke that
Was that you?
That was me.
Okay. At 5? Do a little back walking? Awesome.
There you go.
Awesome.
So I often joke that I learned my trade from, my feet up through my dad's back, through practice. And isn't it amazing how, the universe and God really puts us in positions very early on to help to mold us and inform us and educate us on our path. And if we're tuning in and watching, we can see those little nudges along the way. And that really was my guide to explore more hands-on healing, and which led me to, from farm boy in southern Saskatchewan, in Saskatchewan, I was the first person in my family really to go on to become a doctor of any type.
Okay.
Right. So, I mean, it was a stretch for me for sure. But
And would that be university as well, or did you have others?
my mom was educated as a
Okay.
teacher. So
Okay.
yeah, there was some education for sure in her family,
Yeah.
but it was a stretch for me to do it, but it was a calling. It was for sure a calling. And, I just knew I wanted to help people, and chiropractic felt like the most direct avenue to do that. So away I went.
Okay, so this is interesting to me because I like what you said, that sometimes, that if we're paying attention, we get clues, the breadcrumbs along the way of what there might be there for us to do, or what we might be attracted to. So, you're walking on your dad's back, you're 5 years old, you're probably not thinking in those terms. I'm not sure whether you were raised in a spiritual household or a religious household, or how that looks. So at what point did you... Couple things here. At what point did you say, "Oh my gosh, this is what I want to do," and then the B side of that is, how much resistance did you have to it when it was showing itself to you?
Those are great questions. Let me see. So, I always had it in the back of my mind, and I was always a compassionate and sensitive young boy.
Okay.
Which, when I was, say, 10, growing up on a farm in a farming community, which was really dominated by a hockey mentality,
Right.
which included, what was cool for young boys was like picking fights and
Right. So
having fist fights.
tough male, masculine kind
Right.
of attitude, right? Not hey, let's cuddle and, have some spiritual moments, right?
Sure. So being a sensitive, compassionate young boy I was kind of out of flavor, right?
Right.
And so that was probably the time where I had the most conflict with my core nature, was through my early teenage years, right?
Okay,
And
yeah.
trying to fit in with those boys. And I remember, getting in fights myself. I look back and I'm like, oh my goodness, what was I doing?
Right.
I was really not honoring my truth, for sure. So that was a time where I wasn't honoring my core,
Right.
for sure.
So there was some awkwardness there for you. Just so would you say that was trying to fit in?
Trying to
be like,
Absolutely.
this is what everybody else is doing, I should do this too.
Yeah.
And I hate to use the phrase, but man up kind of attitude.
For sure.
Yeah,
For sure.
okay.
And I hated how sensitive I was. I go to school and I'm very energetically astute. So I'd be able to kind of tune in unknowingly the energy in the room, in the classroom and whatnot. And often I'd come home at the end of the day and I would just be so emotionally wiped from it, often in tears. My father had no idea how to relate to me, and I really didn't know what was going on with me as well.
Right.
At that time, it really was my weakness. But as I grew and developed myself, that actually became my superpower.
Right. So what seemed like a weakness then, because you weren't really aware of what it was or what was going on within you,
Yeah.
is actually the gift that you've been able to carry forward into your adult life.
For sure. For
Right.
sure.
And so what was the relationship like with your dad then? Did he expect more, manliness, so to speak, out of you, or more aggression out of you, or was he trying to find who is my son?
Right.
I'm curious about
I think
that.
there was a lot of that. I give a lot of credit to my dad. He was a farmer. He really had no kind of relatedness to who I was as a spirit at the time. He did, he was kind of as clueless as I was, but he really did his best. I remember him sitting by my bedside and really trying to connect with me and talk to me and rub my temples at times. So no, he did very well. But what was valued in the farm at that time was being a great mechanic, getting the acres done, driving the combine,
Right.
Farming the land and then chasing cattle. So, and I'd participate in that. But I was horribly accident prone. Right. And it was just not my scene.
So I'm curious, I got to interrupt.
Yeah.
So the accident prone, was that due to a lack of attention? Maybe because
Sure.
that just was not your interest. And so
Right.
you're kind of daydreaming almost
Of
at times.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm out somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
And this was not going to be my vocation, right? But I was doing it because my family needed to be done and I wanted to help out.
Yeah.
The family unit is so strong in a farm, so I was doing what I could. But then it would be like, the number of accidents to my brother, who ended up being a journeyman mechanic and grew up on the farm. I mean, my mistakes were probably 4-1 on what he was doing.
Right.
You know,
Is this a younger brother?
Younger
Yeah,
brother,
okay.
exactly. Yeah. And mistakes are always part of the farming experience, right? And so, but it was a tough upbringing
Right.
for sure.
Right. So what sort of accidents would you be prone to?
Oh my goodness.
Like breaking limbs or?
So, I mean, on some of the quarters, no, I wouldn't say so much breaking limbs. I would say more mechanical mishaps. Okay?
Oh, so machinery breaking.
Yes, exactly. So imagine you're out and
Costing the farm
you're
money.
swathing like a whole 160 acre field.
Yeah.
And in the middle of the field is this little upcropping of like a bit of grass, right? And it looks a little different than the weed around it. But if you're not like really paying attention, oh, well, I'm going to just swath that little bit of grass there. But that's actually a rock pile.
Right.
You know, then
Right.
you've got the swather piled up on rocks that have been piled up over the last
Right.
20 years, right? And you've broken the sickle blades and the knife guards and everything else. And
Right.
this is now a 4 or 5
Did
hour.
you have a radio? You could radio in.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, by the way, it's Norm here.
For
Another problem.
Absolutely embarrassing. And you know, getting stuck at times. And so there was lots of different mishaps for sure. And it was an incredible place to grow up. We got to experience so much. You know, I was driving a grain truck when I was like 6 years old, right? Which looking back at it is just like insane to think about, but it was just the culture, right? My dad
what you did.
needed the truck to be moved from this part of the field to that part of the field. So he'd get in, set the throttle control, jump out of the truck on the go. And then there I am, you know, at 5 driving the truck, and he'd CB radio me and say, "Oh, you got to turn it to the right. You got to turn a bit more to the right." So I'd turn it. No, the other way, the other way.
The other right,
I
the
didn't
other
know
right.
right or left, and just fantastic, right?
So this I've been having this podcast with another friend of mine, and it's been and we did a few shows called Being Dad. Right. So you bring up something that I think is really interesting to me in that your dad's approach, and I'm just going to say how it lands with me, is your dad's approach was trusting that if he showed you how to do something, he could trust that you could do it. Because I find a lot of parents are no. Right. Like you raise your kid with no, as opposed to yes, and let me show you how to do it. Let me watch you how you do it, right? So it might even be like, watch me do it first.
Right.
I'll show you how to do it and I'll watch you, and then I'll let you do it on your own.
Fantastic. Yes.
Yep.
And, you know, often really busy, didn't have time to show me.
So you're going to figure it out.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Right.
And then it was like, oh boy. And often I'd figure it out, but sometimes I wouldn't, but give him credit because the trust was there.
Well, that's what I mean.
And we really learn best through experience,
Yeah.
through doing. And I mean, there was a lot of high pressure in those times too, right? And the mistakes were, you know, oh goodness, we're down for 5 hours in the middle of harvest. That's tough, right? So the emotions would boil up. But all in all, he was very generous.
Yeah, like
with
that
this
sounds to me like a
understanding.
great philosophy. Like even if there's no time to show you in the moment, the fact that the willingness to say, hey, you can do this.
Yeah.
Like as a kid, my dad was similar. He allowed me to do things, but I've certainly seen enough examples, and I'm sure you have too on the planet, of people that are not allowing their children to express and to be outgoing and to learn things. And so they grow up without the ability to actually solve problems for themselves or even figure out where to start.
100%, right? And you know what? Through me having the opportunity of being a young farm boy and driving tractor and having those mistakes, I learned very clearly early on I was not going to be a farmer for the rest of my life, right? Which is a great learning, right?
The beauty of this, Dad, was you actually showed me I have no interest in doing this.
I mean, yeah, I have interest because it is my family of heritage.
Right.
My family's involved in it, but I had no interest in
taking
being
that
a
on.
farmer and really taking that on for sure. And isn't it true that we really learn that through trial and error, right? You try it on, put yourself in it. I think too many people and probably too many parents too are trying to to find the exact perfect niche, figuring that out first, and then allowing the child or the person to go into it versus just getting messy, right? And trying it on and then course correct from there. And that's really served me through my life for sure. My willing to just jump in, take something on. I'm a high quick start. I'm a visionary. I'll take something on, just with the flash of an eye. Okay, I got that idea. Let's take it. I'm saying yes, I'm into it. And then I'll figure it out from there.
Right.
Or find somebody else who can help me with it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think my first podcast I ever recorded, 4 or 5 years ago was basically on an iPhone with a microphone.
Right. Yeah.
Not this. So you do what you can, you get messy, you figure stuff out.
Right. And how many people have had the idea of having a podcast and been trying to plan it, organize it, get the right microphone, the right lighting, 6 months later, a year later, still haven't done their first podcast, right?
Because they think they need all of this stuff when in actual fact, if you just start.
Just get into it. Yeah.
And learn and things will show up, right? That's interesting. So you're farming, you're a teenager. When do you realize, what? I actually want to become a chiropractor.
Absolutely. So, it was my last year in high school. I knew I wanted to help people, right? So I explored the different vocations, physiotherapy, maybe doctor, medical doctor. I knew I didn't want to get blood on my hands. That just felt too intense for me. The chiropractors I met seemed like they had a great work-life balance that really fit for me. Mm-hmm. They were very happy with their careers. So I said, I'm going to go for it. And my mom, fortunately at the time, said, you know what, this is a really long road. Before you jump into the professional studies, I'd like you to take a year off and go and travel the world. Great guidance.
Right.
And so I did that. And I linked up with IAEA, International Agricultural Exchange Association.
Right.
I got linked up with a family on the North Island of New Zealand. And I got to go out and live in New Zealand with this wonderful family. And we worked on their, it would have been like 3,500 acre sheep farm. They had it was like 30,000 sheep.
Wow.
Just a total another experience. And they were speaking a language I couldn't really understand. Their New Zealand accent in the backcountry was so strong. So I was constantly having to ask for interpretations or what they're trying to say.
Did you ever get to the point where you understood it?
Yeah, I got better at it.
Yeah,
for sure. And along with that, there was another 130 people from around the world, kids my age, 19 to 26, somewhere in there, from Denmark and Scotland and England and France and just all around the world who had congregated in New Zealand to be part of this association. So I had one, and that was probably my favorite year of my life. It was just truly amazing and made some great friends and really got to know a lot about myself. And I'm so glad I took that year, just as a pause year.
Yep.
I think we're so often just kind of trying to get to that end goal, right? And race. And then once we get to the goal, then we're off to the next one. And so thanks, Mom, for that. It was a wonderful year. I learned a lot about myself, and it certainly served me well. When I did then come back to go to university, I was ready. I was set. Mm-hmm. I kind of cleared that experience out of my system. I had gone and had that year of fun, and I was set and locked and really focused on my studies. And when I came in that first year, there were so many students who had just kind of plowed right back into school after graduating. And they showed up to university. It was their first time away. And they spent more time in the bar than they did in studying, right? Because they just had never been on by themselves. So it was a fantastic approach for me, for sure.
Right. So you felt like, I've already gotten loose and done some stuff. And now I'm actually doing this it's time for me to get focused.
I was focused.
Right.
Yeah. I was really into it. So.
Right. So the sheep farming.
Yeah.
What would you say? What would you say you learned?
Oh.
Not just about sheep farming, but about yourself. Like if you were to just sit back now and think, what are some real life takeaways that I still have from that experience? What would you say that is?
Yeah. Wow. That's a great question.
And I know I didn't prep you for this, so
here's this sensitive, compassionate boy again on a farm, right?
Yeah.
And I got myself into some pickles of experiences there too, right? For instance, it was a very hilly terrain,
Right.
steep hills. Sheep love to graze the hills. That's why sheep are chosen on the hills, because they're fantastic at climbing up insane hills, right? And so when I arrived, the farmer had shown me this 4-wheeler, and he was so proud of it because it was a front mount engine. And he was like, this thing will go up any hill, right? Except for one day, the hill that I was trying to go up.
Except for the hill that Norm picks.
Right, exactly. And if you give the vehicle a little extra throttle when you're going up a hill, it really kind of... So the 4-wheeler actually came over me.
Oh my gosh.
Wow, it was really intense. A big 4-wheeler. And it actually landed on... I was on all fours, and I was trapped underneath the 4-wheeler. And not a... I was in a horrible experience, right? It would have been probably a 1,500 pound 4-wheeler. And I was trapped. I was getting bruised on the side of my ribs as the wheel and the spokes were poking into the side of my body. And I was trapped, and I was probably about 5 miles away from the homestead. And the incredible part of the story is what rescued me was a horse. Yeah.
Okay.
The matriarch of the farm, she was out riding her horse. And the horse was kind of spooked. It wasn't comfortable. Something was up. And so she wrestled with the horse for a little while, right? And trying to steer the horse where she wanted the horse to go. And the horse was like, no, there's something, And so eventually, finally, she just let the horse lead. And the horse leaded her to me.
Wow.
Yeah, incredible, right? And I was under the bike for probably 2 or 3 hours.
Right.
I was trapped. Completely helpless. The sheep were around. They came up. They were checking me out.
Yeah.
Right. And here I was completely trapped. So what did I learn through all that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So here I am, this young boy away, gotten really knocked up from that experience. And, I was ready to go home at that point. I was really humiliated. I felt like I just didn't have it in me to do what needed to be done on this job. I felt horribly embarrassed. There was quite a bit of damage done to the 4-wheeler. And what got through me there was really my connection with the host family. And, when I've learned through this, if we're humble enough to receive support, it will show up. And it might not always show up in the way that you're familiar or the way that you'd like. I would have loved my mom to be there.
Of course, yeah.
And just me kind of crying her shoulder for a little bit, but she wasn't available, right? And so I really had to humble myself and let my guard down and show my tears. They were there. I couldn't just, tough it out and let myself be vulnerable with the family. And the family really, thank you, Tim and Sue. They really met me. They really got in touch with who I was as an individual. Maybe I was a fish out of water. Maybe it wasn't the best farmhand. But they knew that I meant well and it was an accident. And that really helped to guide me through this. And for sure, a great life lesson, is to be open to support and in the way that the world is presenting it. Don't be attached to who that support's coming from or in what way it looks like.
Right.
Yeah.
Sort of like when you're, I'll use the word, when you're praying for something, don't have how it's supposed to look
Exactly.
as the outcome. Be ready to accept what is there, that what shows up to support you. I'm fascinated by the horse. Like, did you guys talk about that? Like you and the family, you and her, the matriarch, did you
Absolutely.
guys, the fact that the horse was like, no, we got to go this way.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a learning lesson for her too, right?
Right.
And I think most horse people do get in touch with their animal and they know if there's something a little off. And isn't that wise to be tuned into our environment, those people around us, the animals around us? Right? Because they're constantly communicating to us. They're picking up, they're way more sensitive than we are, right?
Yeah.
The horse led her, it was from a mile away. How the horse sensed me, I don't know.
Right.
But the horse knew it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have some friends up island that Leap Zone Strategies, Isabel and Margarita, that they do coaching and they bring in, business owners and things like that. I've worked with them in the past, and they use horses as part of their work that they do with people. And I remember we went down, to the horse and actually there's a few horses. So me and my business partner at that time, we went and worked with the horses and just for some guidance and it was amazing. It was fascinating actually what the horse was tuning into. And, I won't tell the story because this isn't about me. This is more about you. But yeah, I get that. I totally see how the horse, they're very intuitive beings. There's something about them, just as we are.
Right. Yeah.
And what if we tuned into that intuition that we can have, right? And I love the story about vulnerability. So you leave the farm, and thank you for sharing that story, by the way. I appreciate that. You leave the farm, you come back, and you're ready for university. And so where did that all happen?
Yeah, that was U of S, so back in Saskatoon.
Yeah.
And so it was 3 years I needed to do.
Yeah.
And then I could apply to chiropractic school. And so I did my 3 years. I did relatively well. And then I did my application, which included an interview. And when I came out of the interview, I knew that I just didn't hit the mark. It was good, but it wasn't great. And it was incredibly competitive at the time. They were interviewing like 1,000 people for 120 spaces.
This is at chiropractic college.
Yeah, for the college in Toronto. And so that gave me one more year to go back and just to increase my GPA. And during that time, I also took Toastmasters as well. I saw that was a weak spot. I was intelligent, but I didn't have the human side yet. I wasn't a great communicator. My confidence wasn't quite there with where it needed to be. And Toastmasters was fantastic. It just really helped me get more confident answering questions, being able to kind of pick up on ideas and just roll with it. So then when I went back for my fourth year and then at the interviews at the end of that, I aced it and I felt so good coming away. Just knew that I had really done my best to prep for it and I just put it all on the table. And there was very little doubt at that point that I was going to get in. So.
Yeah. And then how long was chiropractic college?
Well, this is a longer story.
Do we have? All right. We're good. We're good.
Yeah. I'm not sure how much in detail we're going to get into, but I turned a 4-year journey into 6 years.
Right.
They liked me so much, they invited me back for 2 more years, which, that was around a different philosophy around adjusting approaches. And the college that I was going to was very, I'll say in the old school, very physically minded, very pain-based. At the same time, I was being introduced to a far more holistic, a more elegant approach, a more low force, a more energetic approach. And at the same time, I was being introduced to some phenomenal, I call them like avatars, just ascended beings who had brought chiropractic forward to another tier, another level. And so I was kind of at this choice point of like, do I do this approach, what I'm being taught at school, which is not feeling right, or do I go into this approach, right? And so I did, and I went full into it. Loved it. Traveled up and down the eastern coastline to workshops. I made trips to Colorado and Atlanta and down to Florida, and I just did everything I could just to soak it up, and I did, and I got incredibly passionate about it. And the hiccup was in my 4th year, which is when we were in our student practicums. And at that point, I was way more confident and way more comfortable with the more low force honoring approach. And I also had the opportunity, there was upper year students who had been working with patients in that model. And so when the turnover came, it was like, well, Norm, he's the low force guy. We're going to just refer all of our patients to him. So I had all these people who wanted to receive this approach.
Right.
So I dove in and I started offering what I felt was excellent care, and probably the patients felt that way too. However, word got around to some of the clinicians that I was not doing chiropractic the way I had been taught and the way they wanted, which opened up a pickle of a situation for me. and that gave me a timeout.
Right.
And I was invited back for another year of school. So that was another one of my hard knocks. You're hitting on all the hard knocks here today. This is great.
That's good. That's good. Give me 1 sec. So they invited you back for the 6th year.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
So just so you know, when I went for ministerial school, when I applied, they give you 2 interviews, right? And sort of it's like one's the good team and one's like the bad team, right? They're trying to get in to see who you are, right? Are you, because if you're not cut out for this, then they want to redirect you. That's the term they use at Unity. We're going to redirect you. And so you get the first 2 meetings, and if both teams don't agree, you get a 3rd meeting. And this is the way it is throughout ministerial school. You have all of these licensing and ordination events that you meet with 2 teams 3 times a year. And if both teams agree, great. If they don't agree, then you're given a 3rd meeting, right? So I was given the 3rd meeting. Just so you know, because I had to fight them, right? I was like, I'm not going into this easily, by the way.
Yeah. So. Well, I think that's where we meet. And I was just looking through, some of your back catalog of your videos and your podcasts. And, I think there's something to be said around the rebel, right? The spiritual rebel.
Yeah.
Right. And the one who doesn't fit into the Orthodox model. And then what? How do we find our way through there? And, that's been my course. And sometimes I get bumped, right? And that was a nudge from the universe. That was a guide saying, hey, kid, check in here. And, in my soul, I didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
I was serving those people to the best of my ability, fully consented. That's what they wanted. Mm-hmm. However, there was a naivety to the playground I was playing in. Right. And who had the power. Right. And that's where...
sometimes you got to do what's required. I actually, when I was accepted into ministerial school, I had a coaching call with a wonderful human being. Her name is Martha Creek. And she's down in Kentucky. And her advice to me was... I'll do this terrible Kentucky accent, but Martha's like, honey, she's like, Thomas, honey, listen, they're going to want you to do a whole lot of things, probably some stuff you're not going to want to do. Just do them so you can get through this, and then you can do what you're here to do. Yeah. And when I heard those words, I was like, oh, that is definitely for me.
Right. Listen
that was the gold of the, 35-minute call we had.
Yeah.
That was the gold piece, was just do. And so I did. I just put my head down and I did whatever was required so that I could get through it.
Right.
And get to the side now where, I can do what I'm here to do, so to speak.
Yeah,
right?
For sure. And, there's a balance there. I think we've always got to be checking into that.
Sure. Yeah.
Of where we stand and how far we can kind of stretch things. And in some degrees, it's appreciated, those who walk slightly different outside of the Orthodox box. But then there's a time and a place, right? Mm-hmm. And we've got to realize when we are in a vulnerable place, which as a student I was, and so were you, right? That's not the time to be rocking the boat.
Yeah, because other people have authority and power, and you don't know where they're coming from.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. And boy, did they like to demonstrate their authority and power.
Yeah.
Right? It was once I gave them that opportunity, they had this was going to set a message to students for decades to come, right? And so they really took the opportunity to demonstrate their authority and power.
Yeah. Interesting, right?
Yeah.
All right, so you get through school, and you're in Saskatchewan.
Right. I went back to Saskatchewan.
Yeah, okay.
For just a few months, about 4 or 5 months.
Yeah. Oh, so because the college was in Ontario, or it was in Toronto, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And so, I stopped back at home. I started just a small locum, and I helped out my family through that last harvest. And then I was free to roam at that point. I knew I didn't necessarily want to reside in Saskatchewan. I had too much of the concrete jungle and the 401 parking lot of Toronto. And so, I wanted to find a place to live. My brother had been living interior BC, and he's like, you know what, Norm, I think you'd really like BC. So I packed up what was then a Toyota Corolla station wagon.
Right.
And I took a cruise through BC. I took 3 weeks. I stopped at all the major centers. I had a wonderful trip. And I had 36 hours in Nanaimo. And boy, I remember that time just like yesterday. It was phenomenal. I happened to show up on Silly Boat Weekend Regatta, right? Which we've all been to, those of us who are in Nanaimo. It's a fantastic time, right? The community comes out totally playful. It was sunny. Our harbor is so beautiful. So I just took that in. I was like, wow, this is an incredible community. And then I walked.
Right. And coming from the farm, land
Toronto.
everywhere to the ocean, that's a whole different vibe.
Right.
Like I know that's a whole different vibe.
Really was. Yeah. And I had about probably 4 or 5 synchronicities in those 36 hours. I remember one, I walked into a music store, right? And I love, you might know the band Talk Talk.
Yeah.
Canadian band Talk Talk.
Oh my gosh. Okay, hold it. Hold it. So Leslie and I went to Vancouver last weekend, and we went for some dinner in a sort of a lounge at the hotel, right? So bar / lobby, or bar / lounge kind of spot, and there's a guy sitting there wearing a Talk Talk t-shirt, right?
There you go.
And I'm like, that's like the only guy I've ever seen wearing.
And now you're talking to me about Talk Talk.
And a week later, you're bringing up Talk Talk.
Right.
One of my secretly favorite bands, right?
Fantastic.
Like they're not known by a lot of people, but man, they wrote some great tunes.
Oh,
and
incredible.
the singer, I don't even remember his name. He passed away a couple of years ago, right? But great voice, great piano player. Anyhow, thank you for.
There you go. So I was just getting into Talk Talk, love their music, right? And I'm going to the music store and I was like, hey, do you by chance have any Talk Talk, right? Maybe a used CD or something like this, right?
Like
this is kind of a rare band. And he's like, used CD? No, but we've got some vinyl. And he walks me over to the record section, right? And he's got like 12 Talk Talk albums. I'm like, this is insane. Yeah. This is so incredible, right? So that was one of my.
He had all of the Talk Talk albums that were available in the world were actually
and
in
some
his
singles
store.
And whatnot, right? Just in the small record store. And so this was one of the multiple synchronicities that I had when I was here in Nanaimo. And so then I went back to Saskatchewan, and people were like, so how was your trip? Where do you want to settle? What was attractive to you? And of course, as a student up until then, trying to figure out where you're going to live, you kind of look at like demographics and how many chiropractors are in that town for populace and the income of the town maybe, or things of that nature, right? And here I am routing my life according to synchronicities, right? So mom and dad, so Nanaimo. Yeah, that felt really right. And so why Nanaimo? I had no answer. It was just like
they have Talk records there,
records, man. Exactly. But it was just, I was in a flow state when I was here.
Yeah.
There were so many synchronicities. It felt totally right in my being. And I was willing to take the leap just based on that. And, after moving here, I see now why it was a great fit for me and why I was a great fit for Nanaimo as well. But I certainly didn't have all that information then, right? But I did have that feeling and those synchronicities, which is the universe just saying, yes, this is on track for you. So, yeah.
That's awesome. All right. So we started off with talking about that source connection, right, for you. And so I know you have a practice. I've come into your practice and you have served me at times. And so if we were to kind of fast forward to now, what are you seeing in the world? I guess what I'm trying to get at is on a spiritual level, on a metaphysical level, on an understanding of the human condition, so to speak. What are you seeing in the world right now in terms of who you're serving and what maybe, I don't know if I don't know if complaint is the right word, but what is the struggle that you're seeing most from people?
Right. I think the number one is people are coming in wanting something more, wanting something different. Maybe their old route of healthcare or the modes that they used to rely on, they might have lost trust with, or maybe it's brought them to a point, but they want to go beyond that. So there is a real curiosity within people for something different, which is refreshing for me. When I first moved here and I was offering this holistic, energetic approach.
Right, because you don't do the traditional chiropractic work, right?
We call that more structural in nature, right? Where there's a cavitation herd and a more structural release. Yeah, it's more gentle. The amount of pressure that you'd be comfortable to put on your eyelid, actually.
Right.
Okay. And so when I was offering that when I first came here, it was uphill, right? People were like, what is this? This is not chiropractic. This doesn't work. I was a snake oil salesman.
Yeah.
It was very
kind of
difficult.
like spirituality in some ways at times,
Fair
right?
enough, right? Whereas now people are into it. They're looking for it. They've already Google searched. They know this is a different approach. They're into something more holistic, more integrated. And the other part too, in my approach, we don't use the word patient. Okay. Patient is kind of me treating you. Well, I've got all the answers and I'm going to fix you. With our approach, we use participant. Right. And doesn't that make more sense? Right. Because truly we all are participants in our own health. Right. And so, and that plays out within the chiropractic approach that I do too. It's not just the contact that I do that's going to create the effect. It's actually your participation with that contact. So the client participates through working with their breath, right? Through their focused attention, through learning to direct energy and movement in their body. So there's a real collaborative approach that is part of this. Now, say 18 years ago when I first moved to town, people weren't into that. They were just like, hey, just fix me, doc. Whereas now people are starving to take more responsibility for their health, to take a more active role. They want to be engaged and have a role in it. So that's very refreshing. And I actually give thanks the last 4 years for that, because it really was a wake-up call for many of us around what happens when we just off our responsibility
offload it, right,
to somebody else.
Yeah.
Right. We all realize that, wait a second, I think there's more to health than just turning it over to an outside authority.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, I mean, this is like you can't practice prayer and meditation by having somebody else do it. Like, and Unity was founded on healing, on prayerful healing. Like that's the foundation of Unity principles, is the starting of Myrtle Fillmore healing herself.
Incredible story.
Right?
Yeah.
So I mean, for you, you're preaching to the choir on this, right? Like I totally get that I have a lot of say with what goes on in this unit here.
Yeah, 100%. Now, and then the next step with that too is recognizing that, we can't do it alone. Right? Because there are some who would take that to the degree of then I'm not going to see a professional. Right. But there is something magical that happens when we come together and we work as a team. Right. There's a role for the guide. Right. For the one who has the clinical experience in the background, who can say, okay, you've been trying that. Well, how about we bring our focus over here? Like I see so often with people, I'm just going to talk about the trade from my approach for a second, but often, people will come in with like, say, left-sided hip pain, right? And I do my analysis and I'm like, man, the block is actually on the right side, right? What if we were to shift your focus onto the right side? You know the problem so well, but where's the solution? And the solution is actually counterintuitive. It's where you weren't looking, right? We're so ingrained in looking at the problem. It actually takes some effort to pause, shift our focus.
Right.
And oh man. And when I shift my focus there, that left side relaxes. That's incredible. Right.
Right. Because they're looking at where the pain is, not where the cause might be coming from.
The cause, and I'd even go so far as to say the solution.
Right.
Okay. Right. Those are a little bit different, what the cause and what the solution is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah. And so that to you, does that, if I were to ask you then, how does that relate to spirituality for you? How does that, because I mean, spirituality can be a deep, dark hole in what somebody thinks it is, right?
Sure.
Like I've certainly had my number of people that have come to me going, it's all just a bunch of rubbish, right? So for you, in terms of taking that idea of, hey, you're a doctor who has been, taught the way the body works, so to speak, right? And then the idea that, well, actually we have a lot more say in that on a metaphysical and spiritual level, not just the physicality. How does that show up for you, like in terms of how you see it? Did I even ask a question there? I don't know if I did.
I was going to ask, can you reframe the question?
Yeah. So on a spiritual level, if you were to take this into a spiritual realm,
Sure.
How would you equate that knowingness within somebody? Like, I get you're helping them, but where do you think that comes from inside people? Do you think like we have some innate knowing if we're open up to it?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Sorry, the answer is so obvious.
Right.
And I got your question now.
Yeah.
But for sure, we all have an innate knowing and intuition, right? Which we're in tune with.
Or maybe we're not.
Well, sometimes we're not.
Yeah.
I mean, it's available, let's say that, all the time.
Right.
From you walk into the room and your body relaxes and you feel good versus you walk into a room and your tummy tightens up and your anxiety starts spinning, right? Well, that's your body giving you feedback.
Right.
And so you want to be listening to that, not pushing through it and blaming your body, right? Some people will do that. Oh my God, my anxiety. Oh, my bad gut, whatever. Well, it's like maybe you're in the wrong environment. Maybe you need to check into that. Maybe your body's actually giving you some important information that you need to make a change.
Right.
Because pain truly is not the problem, right? Pain is the invitation to make a change. It's your body's cry for help saying, hey, you got to make a shift here. You got to make a change. So we want to honor that. So my role as a chiropractor isn't to remove the pain, but rather to help them get more connected, the person to get more connected, to understand what those messages are meaning, what the body's trying to tell them. And then from there to make the appropriate changes.
Right.
So how does that connect with spirituality? Well, to be honest with you, I don't know where one stops and the other begins.
Yeah.
At this point in my life, I see it so infused, right?
Mm-hmm.
The physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, they really all feed off one another, right? And so, we can look at it from a few different directions. Physically, when we are more aligned, when we're more at ease, when we're more open and connected, we are for sure going to be more connected to source.
Right.
Okay. And when we're more connected with source and we're praying and aligned and connected to our higher self and our higher source, then our physical body is going to feed off that as well. It's going to fall into better alignment as well. And so, it all feeds off each other. It's very integrated.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see it like one and then the other. I see it all merge as one.
Right. And I'd also go that when we're not tuning into one, we're probably damaging, we're not open. There's going to be problems that arise when we're not there. And as you were saying that, it just made me think of the horse, right? The connecting to that energy and frequency that the horse knew. And was it Sue? Is that her name?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like for her to finally stop resisting the horse wanting to do something.
Right.
And allowing that, if I want to call that spirituality, because to me that's what it is. There's an unknown. I don't need to define it as much as understand that is that realm, that tuning into intuition, that tuning into your gut saying something, tuning into what the energy feels like around you. That is all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's energy and information within and around us. Right. And it's our nervous system and our energy system that really is what allows us to connect to that energy and information through our body senses, but also our senses in the environment as well, the subtle cues around us.
Yeah. Would you say we can get stuck too much up here in
100%.
the old brainiac?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, when we're thinking, we're not feeling.
Right.
Okay. When we're thinking, we're not in our sensory, in our felt sense.
Right.
And so typically when you're thinking future or the past.
Right.
You're not present, right? Being present, that's really where it's at, right?
Yeah.
Because when you're present, you're in tune. You're getting a sense of the rapport of the other person. Oh, I got to pause. I'm going to let Norm talk a little bit more. Oh, here's my turn, right? That you're picking up that all the time. And we're doing that in relationship with our family, our friends, our coworkers. Right?
Yeah. And not that thinking is bad.
Not that thinking
It's
is
required
bad.
at times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would use the word contemplation.
Right.
I think there's a difference between thinking and contemplation.
Yeah.
Yeah, thinking, often the thinking cycle is where we're just kind of spinning thoughts over. A lot of us will think the same thought sometimes 1,000 times over in a day. That's not effective. Yeah. Whereas contemplation is where we have a focus and we're going to ponder on that and think at it from a few different angles.
Yeah.
There's wisdom there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was Buddha who said that, if we were to look at our life, he suggested that 1/3 of our time would be in study. 1/3 of our time would be in meditation, and 1/3 of our time in contemplation, right? And I think in our culture, we overemphasize the information, the studies, reading more, right? Getting more information.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to hey, should I do a podcast? Oh, I don't have enough information yet. I don't have enough stuff yet. I need to do one more thing, or I need to do that thing before I can ever sign up for that. Right. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. It really halts the process for sure.
Right.
For
and
sure.
so the third one being contemplation.
Contemplation.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. How can people find you?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I'm here in town in Nanaimo. You can check out my website at thelifehouse.ca. Okay.
The Lifehouse.
Lifehouse. You got it.
Nice little play on the harbor aspect of
There you go.
the city, city of Nanaimo, right?
That was an innate thought that came to me on
Yeah.
day number 5 when I moved to Nanaimo was like, you're going to call it the Lifehouse.
Right.
Yeah.
I was actually going to say too, so the lifehouse.ca.
You got it.
Okay.
L-I-F-E.
Yeah.
House.
Yeah.
You got it.
Thank you. I was actually going to say that the contemplation part really sounds to me like prayer in a lot of ways, in that because when I, for me, my prayer practice is to bring into that realm that which is troubling me, that which is, I'm looking, what is mine to do here, or what is my path through this, or, how can I let go of this? These are the kind of questions that I will sit with within myself, depending on what's going on in my life, and allow myself to find that answer.
Which, by the way, those are great questions to ask, right? You can get just through the sense of your question how that's leading you to an answer, to a solution.
Yeah.
Versus say a question like, "What's wrong with me?"
Yeah.
Which just brings us down. So the questions that we're asking, and the questions that we bring into our prayer, into our contemplation, that's really primary for sure.
Yeah. Norm Detillieux.
You got it.
Oh, wow. I did that at the end too, because I asked you before this, and then there was a moment here where I was thinking, do I remember how to say his last name?
Yeah.
Anyhow, thank you, Norm. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. And I know that our Unity watchers and whoever else finds us on YouTube will enjoy this conversation. So thanks.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for the invitation, and thanks for getting the message out and doing what you're doing with our community.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
My pleasure.